Welcome, everyone. My name is Thomas Haver. I coordinate the Renegade Heroes program for community engagement. I'm also a huge fan of Avalon Hill, Milton Bradley, and all of the great games that have been produced by our special guest today. Michael Gray has joined us. You may know him from such games as Mall Madness, Dream Phone, the fantastic Fortress America, one of the greatest games of all time. And the reason why we're here today, Shogun. I've arrayed behind me a number of games that Michael has either directly designed or helped produce because he was also a member of TSR and worked directly with Gary Gygax. He was also with Hasbro after they pulled in the Avalon Hill titles and published those big box games that many of you are likely familiar with. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with a legend. Michael, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So, Michael, today, we have some fantastic news to share with our audience is Renegade is going to be reproducing Shogun slash Samurai Sword slash Ikusa. And we'll talk about those name changes in a bit. So this new game is going to make sure to have the same great gameplay that the fans know and love, but we're going to make a deluxe version with updated artwork, components, updated map, something that's going to be very special for people if they already own existing copies of the game, and I own about a dozen, or if you're going to get into this game for the first time, you weren't able to actually purchase it the last time it was published, which is way back in 2011. So, Michael, first, what are your thoughts about your game originally produced 1986, and now we're going to get a 40th anniversary edition printed up in 2026?
Well, how I actually feel, having been retired for 12 years, having one of your games republished is kind of like a rebirth or a reincarnation. It's like you're still alive. So it's real exciting and it's an honor. And it's nice that I did something that stood the test of time.
I can remember actually where I've moved around the country quite a bit, but when I'd settled back in with my family, I'm actually a block away from the home where I first played Shogun as a teenager in the basement of one of my friends' houses. So it's quite interesting like how this sort of like circle turns, you come back around full circle, and now from the kid who's playing the game, I get a chance to work with great people like you and reproduce and share that love with others. So I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about the development of Shogun? Like, where did the idea come from for you?
Well, at the time, we were looking for, a theme for our next game. And the marketing folks thought what was really popular back then was the what was this show with Mr. Miyagi, the
Karate Kid?
Karate Kid. Yeah,
Ah,
um, Karate Kid was popular, and they thought maybe something that was had that sort of Oriental, Far East would be something that would be good. And of course, a lot of us watched Shogun as a miniseries. I read the books from James Clavell and some of his other books. So basically, it's like, could you do something that would play off of what people are into? Like I said, Karate Kid, like ninjas and all that stuff. So I, you know, bought some books and started to learn about samurai um, and Japan, and then one thing that I always wanted to do was fix what I didn't like about Risk. You know, and at the time, Milton Bradley was going to phase out Conquest of the Empire, which was a really interesting game. But if you played it a lot, the banking system was kind of it needed work. It, and so I just wanted something that uh, where I wasn't always getting picked on by the guy who moved before me, which happens in Risk because you want to knock the guy down so his total number of territories was was not divisible by three because if for every three you got an extra guy. So so the way to get around that one thing is to have not just a circular system of turns, but to somehow randomize it or make it interesting. So the idea of like drawing straws was a possibility. People have done things like just draw a chit from 1 to 6 and you draw one and that's your turn order. But keeping with the theme, uh, we came up with drawn swords and I didn't like the idea of the swords being different lengths because then you'd have to like all the players around the table would have to like get together, get all the swords together, remember which one was mine, which one was yours. So we put little diamonds on them, and that worked out all right. I mean, it was like fair. And then the other thing was, you know, as opposed to a game of Risk where one guy was pretty powerful and he might let you live in Australia, um, just to be nice so you didn't go home. I didn't like that about the game.
Hmm.
So I added the idea that as you play, you get better. So your leaders got a little more mobility uh, as they won battles. But then that kind of seemed like the rich get richer, and you don't want that either. So
Hmm.
I put in the ninjas and had the ninjas be able to kill possibly with a die roll kill off your big guys. However, because everybody got income, and the guy with the most income was usually the guy with the most territory. He had to decide how much of that income am I going to spend to try to make sure nobody else gets the ninja. So it was kind of a fun, kind of a paranoia uh, design element that worked great. I don't know, it was kind of fun. And then deciding whether to buy temporary units um, for less money or permanent units for more money was kind of a cool idea. They did have mercenaries back then, the Ronin.
Hmm.
So I thought that's kind of cool. So I kind of threw it together and we played it. We changed some of the sea lanes that let you get around because if you didn't have them, you could just start at the end and control things, and it'd always go towards the middle. And nobody would want to be in the middle if you played with more than two players. So everything kind of had a purpose. Did that kind of answer your question?
That and more. So much to unpack there as well that, curious about. So I'd say the game itself like has, I think, two fabled components that people can always think back to. What you refer to as the swords themselves for selecting turn order. Like that for sure is going to be in the new edition of the game. Like you have to have samurai swords in the game. The second component that everyone loves is the ninja. Like, and as you mentioned, like that tension that builds within it of like, how much resources in Koku am I going to invest to keep the ninja away so I don't have one of my generals or daimyos assassinated? And, like, it made the planning of it like an extra layer of tension where it's not just like you allocating to have more troops here, add more mercenaries, but like, are they going to put two or three there? Like, I'm at big risk here because I'm going to take a big turn. But you do so, you end up shorting yourself in other area by overinvesting in the ninja, and like that's what leads to like a fantastic back and forth in the game. So if you're saying like your design originally was like you were fixing risk, you did that and more. Like it's amazing to hear your description about the process of adding these in, like the mercenaries of like having them be hidden, like with the card flipped upside down, and you're going to reveal like, oh, this is where I've got the Ronin is another sort of like surprise component where tension is baked into the game that you don't really have that in classic Risk. So it's amazing. So to draw on that more for like your playtesting. So you put this together, like what's the playtest process like Milton Bradley at that period of time? You know, because today a lot of people use like digital components, like where they're going on screen sharing, like set up digital games and play with people across the world. What was it like internally at Milton Bradley?
We played after work uh, amongst ourselves. That was it. I mean, I had a real good, talented team.
Hmm.
Uh, I mean, yeah. I mean, Steve Baker and Rob Davio and Craig Van Ness and Alan Roach, and Wayne Yee, Mark Hauser, everybody pitched in and we played and had a lot of fun. And eventually Milton Bradley management, gave the line to Wizards of the Coast because I think they didn't want to spend in all of our lunchtime and stuff and after work playing these games that only sold like 40, 50,000 units. We could design a chicken that lays an egg and sell 500,000 of them. So I understand from a money point of view, but it was pretty sad when we had to give up the line.
I say, fascinating that you just casually call off like half a dozen like Hall of Fame sort of game designers in there. Like you really had a stacked deck of individuals. So if you have to do a small group, do it amongst the best. You know, you think about some of those games that like we grew up on, like me and my friends, like it's the result of your work. So it's, absolutely amazing. Especially compared to today where you mentioned like how many units, game company, like they're happy if they sell like 3,000 for a print run or 5,000 for a print run or maybe 10,000 on there versus what they're expecting for scale. But you ended up designing some of the like games that stand the test of time, the ones that inspire a lot of people. So it's fantastic and fascinating to hear. I'm also curious, what design did you have in mind, but maybe Milton Bradley didn't pursue? Like the one that got away from you?
Uh, well, I actually remember I did the we did the Game Master series and there was like 5 games I think. Axis and Allies, Broadsides and Boarding Parties, Conquest of the Empire, Shogun, and Fortress America.
Yep.
And I'm really proud of Fortress America for a whole bunch of other reasons, but we won't go into that till you end up doing that game too. Maybe, I don't know. But then in '98, when we got the Avalon Hill company, when Hasbro Interactive bought Microprose, and Microprose had bought Avalon Hill at the time, I got my hands on something that I've always wanted. Because way back in the day, I used to play bridge with Will Niebling and Darwin Bromley and Tom. Anyway, I can't remember his last name, but he was one of the big guys at Tom Shaw at Avalon Hill, and we'd play bridge together. And Darwin and I would talk about like buying and running Avalon Hill someday, And Darwin ran Mayfair. Anyway, it was those were the days. But to get my hands on Avalon Hill, and then it was like, all right, we got to do diplomacy, even though it's a brutal game. Uh, yeah, you can lose your best friend or girlfriend playing that game um, because you got to lie. I mean, you got to fool people, and it's not fun when you get shafted. But it was just a classic, and the version that I sold to Ken Hill when I sold all my games. I mean, I had correspondence with Alan Calamer in there, and when we made the deal to do it, it was pretty cool. And so we did diplomacy. We had to do Acquire for forever. My teen and 20s years, Acquire was my favorite board game forever.
Mhm.
Um, so Acquire's a totally wonderful game, and Craig Van Ness did the design. Um, I play games every Tuesday with the guy who did the box cover. Now, I'm not a big fan of that box cover, and I know there it is. It's been described to me as like very European, um, man with the purple pants. But I'm pretty. I don't know. I'm veering off the topic of Shogun. So we'll
No, I mean,
do another one on the other game.
it all comes together because I think the folks who are watching it now like are not just fans of Shogun, but they're fans of your work because you've done so much stuff. Like you're involved with TSR and work for Gary Gygax, involved with Hasbro and producing the big box games. You're
Yeah,
responsible for the Game Master series. So, it's a fantastic trip down the history of gaming to see how this is all connected. I can't believe, I wouldn't imagine being in your shoes, like being an Avalon Hill fan and then getting like creative control over what comes back in had to be a
yeah.
treat. As I mentioned to you before the interview started, like it was via that friend that you sold some games to that I came in possession of a file box of yours about diplomacy. I know you're a diplomacy play-by-mail player for many years, and then you got to actually work on and produce with, your version of diplomacy is one of the unique ones, and that is because it used metal pieces, right? And these are pieces that you chose the molds from Monopoly. Is that correct? Like the battleship and the artillery piece from that game. I'll bring it in closer for the people who are seeing it. We'll show on the screen hopefully during the interview. You've
Okay.
got some very unique pieces in your edition that you produced for diplomacy.
Well, we use what we can, but you know, no matter what I did, they tried to shave stuff out of it for profit. I mean, that's part of the business. It is a business.
Hmm.
We could talk about that too, because the designer is closest to what the player is going to want. But as a product goes through the system, at least in the big business, uh, uh, it starts off with you got to convince your boss that it's worth doing.
Hmm.
And then eventually you do a prototype or something you put on the table in front of marketing. And then they have to go, yeah, we think we could sell that. And then, eventually it goes to sales. And it's like, well, how much is it? And how many can we sell? And do we get a commission on it? And then it goes to the stores and they want to know how many inches of shelf space it's going to take up and how many you can put in a stack on a shelf and how are you going to promote it.
Hmm.
And then there's grandma who goes to the store and wants to buy something for her war gamer grandson who doesn't know what he wants or anything. So what's she going to buy? Something that has a good looking package,
Hmm.
and finally it gets to the player and the player is going to decide, whether it's good or not. But it got touched by a lot of people that didn't really have the gameplay in mind. And the gameplay is just a rule book.
Hmm.
It's not interesting. It's just a rule book, but that's where the soul of the game is.
So interesting that you mentioned that's sort of the process that you go through and how certain things have changed. So for instance, let's say Board Game Geek or generally just like gaming sites and YouTube channels where now people can go and look at the game and experience it in full before they actually go out and buy it. I'd say one of the other components you mentioned in that product development, that iron triangle, right, the reason for product development that can be adjusted now is with crowdfunding campaigns where you as the supporter, if you like it, can opt into additional components, additional expansions, other components. And that's what we can do actually here with this crowdfunding campaign for Ikusa is we can add those deluxe components and things that the players want. So going back to the original release, like were there any sort of components or things that you wanted to include in the original release of Shogun that didn't make it because of those constraints?
No, I was very happy that I got my castles that came apart because they didn't want to do that, and I just said you got to do that. It's got to look cool. Um, I didn't have that problem. Your last question you asked, is there anything that they rejected.
Hmm.
I had a heck of a time getting House on the Hill into the line. I mean, there's some interesting stories about that. And then finally, it was the next one we were going to do, and then they gave it to Wizards.
Hmm.
And and Wizards, there was some. They didn't proof it and edit it. There were some problems with that first edition of House on the Hill, but I thought it was really good. And I worked with the inventor on it, and um, and I had a game. The next game that I wanted to do of mine was World War IV, um,
Mm.
which was a it was it was a triangular board. It was a board of triangles, not hexagons made of triangles basically, but it was
Hmm.
triangles. And the thing that allowed it allowed the board to be there were like these diagonal lines that went all the way from one end of the board to the other. And so I ran a track around the outside and put military satellites on, up there that could shoot at units on the ground along these lines. And then the satellites moved. So I don't know. That's the one that I never got to do. But, um, I had another game that was a war under the ice in the Arctic that we didn't get done, but it had some cool new ideas in it.
Well, you still have opportunity here. You've got a friend at Renegade Games, so if you want to see, any of those, I'm sure we can put you into contact. You already talked to Dan. We could see if we can bring out some Michael Gray classics on here. They've been brewing for 40 years. I would certainly be on first in line to buy both of those games if we were to go through and develop them.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen, but okay, I'll think about it.
Well, I never thought as a little kid playing like Shogun in the basement or playing Diplomacy with my friends that I'd be working on the new edition of Diplomacy or helping them out with the new edition of Ikusa here. So, never say never.
It is a real kick, and the thing that kind of makes me feel good about my life now that I'm older is that I could bring people together. I did a preface for the best board games of all time that came out. There were a couple books like that, and I said, I've been known to say that games are togetherness in a box. That's kind of my little sort of Mike Grayism. I think games bring people together, and if the game is good and there's some interaction and it's not boring, then um, you enjoy being with other people. And if it's a strategy game and you have to think and make decisions, that's really good. I mean, I'm over 70 and playing games every day. I play games 8 hours a day or more online. Like I said, Board Game Arena, or right now I'm back into Lord of the Rings online because we kind of OD'd on all the other stuff. So we're going back to the old stuff. But I like to think it staves off Alzheimer's, or senility. And so, I think it's good. And if you're in the business, people often ask, what is it about games that make them so fun? It's just like it keeps you young. I mean, having fun it's a human thing that it sticks with you for a while. I mean, it's not like I saw the movie, it's over. It's like I played this game, and if it's a really good game, you could talk about, and I can tell you several of my own that it's almost like you can tell the story of the time when, you know, Jim Ward and Tom Wam designed a Axis and Allies uh, strategy, and they told me for months and months that they had a strategy for the Axis that was going to win every time.
Hmm.
So we sat down to play it. I went to Lake Geneva and we sat down to play it, and when I rolled for research, I was the Americans, which means it's an hour until it's my turn. Um, I rolled like, I don't know, 10 or 12 dice, and I rolled six sixes. Now, that allowed me to have six advanced technologies like the atomic bomb and submarines and all that. So going into that game, like they played one more turn and then they quit. I mean, it was funny because they had the best strategy that was, always win. I mean, it's just stuff like that you can tell your whole life. I have some other ones too that I don't know. Games can really be like nuggets, gold
I,
nuggets. All right, well, thanks. This was more. This was really fun. It went by fast.
yeah, it absolutely
I
is.
threw in
Again,
stories on all that other stuff, but you know, I don't know. We'll see what happens.
no, it's fantastic stuff for, a large portion of, these game fans want to hear this stuff. This is the insider stuff that they care about, that they appreciate. I know I appreciated it when I told my friends, like whether they're Axis and Allies or Diplomacy or Samurai Swords fans, like they had a whole bunch of questions. They were peppering me with questions. I was trying to remember them as I was going through to ask you, so I don't short shrift them for some of the stuff that they were interested in. But I do hope that like next year when this game is released, that Renegade can do something like bring you out to Gen Con or like have something special for you, because it would be really great to have you play a game when this is released to celebrate the 40th anniversary edition. I'm gonna make that my mission to have Jordan fly you out to Gen Con.
All right, we'll see if that happens.